Would you have trusted Ted Bundy? He was charming. He was smart. He was the kind of man who could smile at you, hold open a door, and make you feel completely safe. And yet, behind that smile was one of the most dangerous killers America has ever known. A man who lured his victims with politeness, only to reveal a darkness so chilling that decades later, people still shiver at his name. Pause for a moment and think, if you had met him in the 1970s, would you have seen the monster? Or would you have fallen for the mask? Ted Bundy wasn't born a monster. At least, not in a way anyone could see. He was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24, 1946, in Burlington, Vermont. From the outside, he seemed like a normal baby, even a blessing. But from the very start, his family life was tangled in secrets and shadows. You see, Bundy was raised believing that his mother, Eleanor, was actually his sister. To hide the shame of being an unwed mother in the 1940s, his grandparents stepped in as parents. Ted grew up confused, caught in a web of lies before he could even walk. Imagine being a child and sensing something is off in your family, but no one explains. That kind of secret doesn't just disappear. It lingers. It shapes you. As a boy, Bundy was quiet. Almost too quiet. Neighbors remembered him as shy, polite, even well-mannered. But children see things adults miss, and some of Bundy's classmates noticed something strange. He liked to wander alone. He liked to watch people. And when other kids were laughing or playing games, Bundy seemed detached, like he was already living in a world of his own. By his teenage years, Bundy had discovered something that gave him a rush: manipulation. He wasn't athletic. He wasn't the best student. But he learned how to charm people, how to study their reactions, how to make them believe in him, and he loved it. At the same time, Bundy developed dark obsessions. He admitted later that he would sneak around neighborhoods, peering through windows, stealing objects, and fantasizing about control. These weren't just teenage curiosities. They were warning signs. Bundy was learning how to wear masks, how to hide the darkness, while showing the world a smile. Still, on the surface, he was the picture of success. He went to the University of Washington. He studied psychology. He got involved in politics. He even worked at a crisis hotline, yes, a hotline meant to save lives. Imagine the chilling irony. Ted Bundy answering phones, comforting strangers with the same voice he would one day use to lure women to their deaths. Here's the terrifying part. Nobody suspected him, not his professors, not his friends, not even his girlfriends. People described him as handsome, intelligent, confident. Some said he was destined for politics. He was the kind of man mothers wanted their daughters to marry, and that's exactly why Bundy was so dangerous. He wasn't the stranger hiding in the bushes. He was the man who offered to help you carry groceries. The man who smiled warmly at you in class. The man who wore a suit and spoke about law and justice. If you had met him, then just another young man trying to make something of himself, would you have trusted him? Because many did. And that trust would become his deadliest weapon. Ted Bundy was not the kind of killer who lived in the shadows. He lived in plain sight. He studied psychology. He mingled in politics. He even became a rising star in the Washington State Republican Party. Photographs from that time show a clean-cut young man with a sharp smile and a tailored suit. He shook hands, kissed babies, and talked about the future of America. But behind that polished mask, something darker was brewing. Bundy had mastered the art of pretending. He could be whoever you wanted him to be. If you wanted a kind, thoughtful listener, he was that man. If you wanted an ambitious leader, he played the part. If you needed a charming date, he knew exactly how to sweep you off your feet. Even his relationships seemed ordinary at first glance. He dated women who described him as affectionate, supportive, even protective. He met their families. He sat at their dinner tables. To them, he wasn't a monster, he was the perfect boyfriend. But sometimes cracks showed. He could be controlling, manipulative, even cold. One girlfriend remembered that he disappeared without explanation, only to return days later with excuses. He was unpredictable, and yet he always had a way of convincing people to forgive him. This was the power of Bundy. He knew how to look safe, even when he wasn't. In the early 1970s, women began disappearing. Young women. College students. Girls who looked strikingly similar, slender builds, long hair parted down the middle. At first, no one connected the dots. A girl vanishes here. Another disappears there. Police treated them as runaways. But in reality, a predator was hunting. Bundy had discovered his method. He would approach women in public, often on college campuses or in crowded places. He would wear a fake cast or walk with crutches, pretending to be injured. Then, in a soft, polite voice, he'd ask for help. "Could you help me load something into my car?" And most women, kind-hearted and trusting, said yes. They never came back. By 1974, the disappearances could no longer be ignored. That year, in Washington state alone, more than half a dozen young women vanished in just a few months. Panic spread across campuses. Women were told not to walk alone, not to trust strangers, not even to trust men who looked harmless. But Bundy didn't look like a stranger. He looked like someone's neighbor, someone's classmate, someone's friend. That was his genius and his horror. The boldest attack came on July 14th, 1974. It was a hot summer day at Lake Sammamish State Park. Hundreds of people were there, families, couples, friends enjoying the sun. In the middle of that crowd, Bundy approached women, introducing himself as Ted. He wore a sling, carried a briefcase, and asked for help loading a sailboat. Witnesses remembered his charm, his smile, his calm voice. Two women, Janice Ott and Denise Naslund, were seen leaving with him. Neither was ever seen alive again. Imagine that. In broad daylight, in a park filled with witnesses, Bundy kidnapped not one, but two women. That's how confident he was in his mask. That's how skilled he was at blending in. For investigators, the Lake Sammamish disappearances were the turning point. Dozens of witnesses came forward describing the man they had seen: handsome, polite, dark hair, driving a Volkswagen Beetle. And finally, the police had a name: Ted. It seemed so ordinary, so harmless. Who would suspect Ted? But now, for the first time, the mask began to slip. Let's stop for a moment. Put yourself in the shoes of those women. It's a sunny afternoon. You're at the park. A nice man, maybe a little clumsy with his broken arm, asks you for help. He smiles. He's friendly. He doesn't look dangerous. Would you have trusted him? That's the question that haunts us, because so many did, and for them, trust was fatal. By late 1974, the Seattle area was paralyzed with fear. Women were changing their habits. Parents warned their daughters. Posters of missing girls were pinned on college bulletin boards. The newspapers gave the faceless predator a chilling title, the campus killer. Police now had something to work with. Witnesses at Lake Sammamish had given a composite sketch. They knew he drove a Volkswagen Beetle. And, most important of all, they had a name, Ted. Thousands of tips poured in, among them a call from someone close to Bundy himself. A woman who had once dated him. Elizabeth Klopfer recognized the description. She told police, "I think the man you're looking for is my boyfriend, Ted Bundy." It should have been enough, but Bundy's mask was strong. He had no criminal record. He was respected in politics. He was studying law. Police hesitated. Could a man like that really be the killer? The answer would soon be undeniable. In August 1975, in Utah, Bundy was pulled over by police for a routine traffic stop. They found burglary tools in his car: crowbars, handcuffs, rope, a ski mask. On paper, it looked suspicious. But Bundy smiled, acted polite, and claimed it was all just a misunderstanding. The mask worked again, yet investigators kept watching him. Then the evidence began to mount. A young woman named Carol Derrench had survived an attack by a man posing as a police officer. She identified Bundy in a lineup. Finally, there was a living witness to say, "That's him." Ted Bundy was arrested. The charming law student, the political hopeful, the helpful neighbor now, he was accused of being a predator. Bundy's trial in Utah was like a stage performance. He represented himself in court, cross-examining witnesses, smiling for cameras. He wasn't just fighting the charges, he was enjoying the attention. But the evidence was undeniable. In 1976, he was convicted of kidnapping Carol Derrench and sentenced to prison. For the first time, Ted Bundy was behind bars. The story could have ended there, but Bundy wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. While awaiting trial for murder charges in Colorado, Bundy found opportunity. He studied law books in the prison library. He gained the guards' trust. And one day, during a break, he jumped from a second-story window and ran. For 6 days, he was free. He wandered the mountains, sleeping in cabins, stealing food. But the wilderness wasn't kind to him. Cold, tired, and hungry, he was caught again. The world thought it was over, but Bundy was just getting started. Christmas, 1977, Bundy had been moved to a jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado. This time, his plan was meticulous. For months, he lost weight, starving himself so he could fit through a small hole in the ceiling of his cell. He studied guard routines. He prepared. And then, one night, he vanished. By the time guards checked his cell, it was empty. Ted Bundy had slipped into the night, disappearing without a trace. This was no temporary escape. This time, Bundy was gone for good. Bundy fled across the country, eventually arriving in Florida. Here, he tried to start over with a new identity, but he couldn't stop killing. In January 1978, the mask came off completely. He attacked a sorority house at Florida State University, the Chi Omega House. In the middle of the night, Bundy crept in with a club. He brutally beat and murdered two young women, Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, and assaulted others. It was chaos. The attack was fast, savage, and public. No more pretending to be the polite stranger. No more luring women quietly into his car. This was rage unleashed in its rawest form. The country woke up to the full horror of Ted Bundy. Think about it. For years, Bundy had hidden behind charm, behind his nice smile and soft-spoken words. He convinced women to follow him into the shadows. But in Florida, he didn't bother with the mask anymore. He showed the world exactly who he was. A predator. A killer. A man who thrived on fear. Would you have trusted him? Thousands did. And by now, the number of victims was climbing into the dozens. It was January 15th, 1978. The Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University had gone quiet after a night of parties. Students slept soundly in their rooms, never imagining that a predator was about to break in. Just after 3 a.m., Ted Bundy entered through the back door. In minutes, he attacked for young women. Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman were bludgeoned and strangled to death. Two others, Karen Chandler and Kathy Kleiner, were beaten so savagely they barely survived. The crime scene was pure chaos, blood on white sheets, broken teeth, torn hair, and the silence of terror, broken only by frantic calls for help. Bundy didn't stop there. Only blocks away, he broke into another home and brutally attacked Cheryl Thomas, leaving her permanently disabled. This wasn't the cunning, quiet Bundy of the past. This was open violence. This was rage. The mask of normalcy was gone. A week later, Bundy stole a car. He was reckless now, careless, and desperate. On February 15th, 1978, a Pensacola police officer pulled him over. The officer, didn't he yet, know he had just arrested one of the most wanted men in America. Bundy fought, but he was subdued. Once his identity was confirmed, headlines blared across the country. Ted Bundy captured in Florida. The man who had escaped justice twice was finally caught again. But this time, the state of Florida was determined not to let him slip away. Bundy faced trial for the Chi Omega murders. And for the first time in American history, a criminal trial was broadcast on live television. Millions tuned in to watch the handsome young law student who had turned into a monster. But Bundy wasn't just a defendant. He became a performer. Acting as his own attorney, he questioned witnesses, smiled at cameras, and tried to charm the jury. He proposed to a woman in the middle of court proceedings, Carol and Boone, turning the trial into a surreal show. The public was divided. Some saw him as pure evil. Others were strangely fascinated, even charmed. Bundy fed on the attention. But behind the theatrics was devastating evidence, eyewitness testimony. Bite mark analysis linking him to Lisa Levy's body and the sheer brutality of his crimes. One piece of evidence became iconic. During the Chi Omega attack, Bundy had bitten Lisa Levy on the buttock. Forensic experts matched the bite mark directly to Bundy's dental impressions. It was one of the first times forensic odontology was used in a high-profile case, and it was damning. Bundy tried to downplay it, but science and circumstance aligned against him. The jury saw through the charm. On July 24, 1979, the jury deliberated for less than 7 hours. They returned with a verdict, guilty. The judge, Edward Cowart, sentenced Bundy to death in the electric chair. But even then, the judge spoke with a strange mix of condemnation and regret. It is ordered that you be put to death by a current of electricity. Take care of yourself, young man. You're a bright young man. You'd have made a good lawyer. I would have loved to have you practice in front of me. But you went another way. It was chilling. Even in condemning him, Bundy managed to pull out sympathy from authority figures. That was his gift and his curse. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't just about murder anymore. This was about spectacle, about performance. Bundy turned a courtroom into his stage. He smiled for the cameras, he played to the audience, and he almost convinced people that he was something other than what he was. But the bite mark didn't lie. The survivors didn't lie. And behind every smile, there was blood. Bundy wasn't done fighting. In 1980, he went on trial again, this time for the abduction and murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Once more, he acted as his own lawyer. Once more, he twisted the courtroom into his theater, but the outcome was the same. Another conviction, another death sentence. Now, Bundy sat on death row in Florida State Prison. The mask was slipping, but even in chains, he remained a figure of fascination. Women wrote him letters. Journalists begged for interviews, and Bundy loved it. Every second. So now, imagine yourself sitting in that courtroom. The cameras flashing, the nation watching. And there he is smiling, smooth-talking, even joking, as though this were just a game. Would you have trusted him? Some still did. Even after the guilty verdict, even after the death sentence. And yet, Bundy wasn't ready to confess. Not yet. The world would have to wait until the final days, when the mask finally cracked. After 2 death sentences, Ted Bundy sat inside Florida State Prison. A small, concrete cell became his stage. Outside, barbed wire and armed guards made sure there would be no more escapes. But Bundy wasn't finished. No, this was just a new act. For years, he filed appeals, motions, and petitions. He became a master of legal delay. His charm shifted from courtroom theatrics to the game of buying time. Every hour alive was a victory. Every delayed execution date was proof he still had power, and he enjoyed that power. On death row, Bundy attracted journalists, psychologists, and even religious figures. Everyone wanted to get inside his mind. What made this man kill? Was he insane? Was he evil? Or was he something else entirely? Bundy played to each audience. With reporters, he was witty and reflective. With psychologists, he pretended to analyze himself. With pastors, he spoke of redemption. But through it all, he rarely admitted guilt. He danced around the truth. He spoke in third person, the killer, the man who did these things. As if it wasn't really him, it was always another mask. Even behind bars, Bundy had admirers. Women wrote to him, sent photos, even proposed marriage. Some traveled across the country just to catch a glimpse of him in the courtroom. Carolyn Boone, who had once believed in his innocence, actually married him in court. She gave birth to a child believed to be Bundy's while he was on death row. Think about that. A man convicted of unspeakable murders, still had women offering him love, loyalty, even family. That was the reach of his manipulation. As the years dragged on, the clock kept ticking. Bundy knew the end was coming. Slowly, cracks began to show. In 1984, investigators realized Bundy had knowledge only the killer could know. He began dropping hints about his past. But Bundy used confession as currency. He didn't admit out of guilt. He admitted to buy time. Each time the state moved closer to execution, Bundy offered something new. Yes, I can tell you about another victim. Yes, I can help you find remains. It became a grim negotiation, one man's life traded for scraps of truth. In his final days, Bundy sat down with Christian broadcaster James Dobson. For the first time, Bundy gave a kind of explanation for his crimes. He blamed pornography. He said violent imagery had fueled his fantasies, escalated his urges, and driven him to kill. But was that the truth? Or just another mask, this time designed to please a religious audience? To some, it sounded like excuse-making. To others, it was a warning. Bundy always knew what to say to capture attention. Even in his last days, he refused to let go of control. By January 1989, the legal delays were exhausted. The world was watching. Crowds gathered outside Florida State Prison with signs reading, "Burn, Bundy, burn." Inside, Bundy finally began to admit more directly. He confessed to more than 30 murders. He described luring women, controlling them, killing them, and disposing of their bodies. But he never told everything. He took secrets with him to the grave locations, names, the full truth of his crimes. Even in his final moments, Bundy controlled the narrative. On January 24th, 1989, at 7:16 a.m., Ted Bundy was strapped into Florida's electric chair nicknamed Old Sparky. Witnesses watched as the current surged through his body. In less than 2 minutes, he was pronounced dead. Outside the prison, a carnival atmosphere had formed. People cheered, vendors sold T-shirts, and crowds celebrated justice finally being done. The monster was gone. The mask was burned away, but the shadow he cast remained. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the lights dim in that prison chamber. The hum of electricity fills the air. A man who once smiled for cameras, who once tricked so many, is now nothing more than a still body in a wooden chair. After years of games, of masks, of charm silence. But the question remains, did Bundy ever truly reveal himself? Or did he die wearing the mask one last time? Ted Bundy left behind more than bodies. He left behind fear, fascination, and a haunting question about human nature. How could someone who looked so normal, spoke so kindly, and seemed so intelligent be capable of such horror? That question has never gone away. It lingers in books, documentaries, movies, and the collective memory of America. And maybe it lingers in you because if Bundy could fool so many, could he have
Think of the last time you met someone new. A stranger smiled at you, shook your hand, and looked you in the eye. In that single moment, your brain made a calculation. Safe or unsafe? Most of the time, we assume the best in people. We want to trust. Now imagine Ted Bundy standing there, smiling, charming, polite. Would you have trusted him? Bundy didn't look like a killer. He dressed well, kept himself clean, and spoke with confidence. In an era when the monster Cashew was expected to look like a shadowy figure in a dark alley, Bundy looked like the boy next door. That alone made people lower their guard. Humans evolved to read faces, voices, and body language quickly. We look for clues of danger, but Bundy was an expert at hiding them. He knew how to mirror emotions, how to laugh at the right time, how to make you feel like you were the most important person in the room. And once you felt that, suspicion faded. Bundy didn't just act normal, he acted better than normal. He practiced friendliness the way an actor rehearses lines. He knew how to tilt his head, how to soften his voice, how to appear vulnerable. Sometimes he wore a fake cast or carried crutches, pretending to be injured. Why? Because vulnerability creates trust. When someone seems weak, we feel safe around them. We want to help. Bundy weaponized kindness. He used the human instinct to care as a trap. It's tempting to think, I would never fall for that. But here's the truth. Many intelligent, cautious people did. Lawyers found him persuasive. College professors saw him as promising. Friends thought he was funny and ambitious. He was invited into homes, given jobs, even offered relationships. Some women fell in love with him after he was arrested, despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt. This isn't stupidity. It's human nature. Bundy exploited the fact that people want to believe the best in others. Psychologists studying Bundy point to 3 key forces. 1. Halo effect. If someone looks attractive, we assume they are good, trustworthy, intelligent. Bundy's looks worked like armor. 2. Social proof. When other people trusted Bundy, it signaled safety. If professors, friends, or girlfriends liked him, then others did too. 3. Cognitive dissonance. Even when suspicion grew, people resisted believing he was guilty. It clashed with the image they had built in their minds. A handsome law student, not a murderer. Bundy lived in that space, the gap between image and reality. When Bundy represented himself in court, he wasn't just trying to delay the trial. He was performing for an audience. Reporters wrote about his intelligence. Some observers thought he was likable, even impressive. A man accused of brutal murders was still capable of charming strangers in the middle of his trial. That's how deep the illusion went. Even in the presence of horror, people hesitated to see the monster. Now, picture yourself walking across a college campus in the 1970s. A man with a soft voice and a friendly smile asks for help carrying something to his car. You glance at him. He doesn't look dangerous. He looks polite, maybe even a little nervous. Would you say no? Or would you, like so many before, step forward to help? That single decision could mean the difference between safety and never being seen again. Bundy's story isn't just about one man. It's about how trust works, how easily it can be manipulated, and how our instincts can be turned against us. We trust because trust makes society possible. Without it, every interaction would be filled with fear. But Bundy reminds us that trust, blind and unchecked, can be dangerous. It's not about paranoia, it's about awareness. Evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like a smile, a cast, a stranger asking for help. Why did so many people believe Bundy? Because he studied human weakness like a textbook. He knew that people trust appearances more than actions, charm more than consistency, words more than instincts. And the scariest part is this: Bundy wasn't supernatural. He wasn't a genius out of reach. He was just a man who learned to exploit the cracks in human nature. That's why the question lingers. If you had met him, would you have believed him too? The prison is quiet on the morning of January 24th, 1989. Outside, crowds gather, some holding signs of anger, others of relief. Inside, Ted Bundy sits strapped into the electric chair. For years, he denied. For years, he charmed. For years, he evaded. But now, there is nowhere left to run. At 7:16 a.m., the switch is pulled. A flash, a spark. A life that had stolen so many others ends. And yet, even in death, Bundy leaves behind a shadow. The question is not simply what he did. It's how he did it, how he convinced so many people to trust him, how he smiled while hiding unimaginable violence, and how ordinary he appeared, right up until the end. Because Bundy was not a monster in the way fairy tales describe. He was worse. He was human. But this story does not belong to him alone. It belongs to the women whose lives were stolen, women who laughed, who studied, who dreamed, who loved. They are the names that should never fade. They are the ones who deserve to be remembered, not the man who took everything from them. So ask yourself, when you look into the eyes of a stranger, when you hear the voice of someone who seems too good to be true, will you trust them, or will you remember the lesson of Ted Bundy? Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it shakes your hand. Sometimes it asks for help. And sometimes it looks just like the kind of person you'd never suspect. Dark screen. White text appears. This story is told not to glorify Ted Bundy, but to remember his victims, and to remind us that trust is a fragile thing,